This program is for educational purposes only. The content is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diseases, nor is it intended to take the place of your primary care physician. The statements in this program have not been evaluated by the FDA. Testimonials are shared as individual experiences of the individual. Results vary and may not be typical. We do not make any claims regarding health or income. As an empowered individual, you do have options available. We are honored to have a founding father of the science of epigenetics guiding us with the best options to obtain or maintain optimal health. Dr. Joel Wallach.
Hello, everybody, and hello and welcome to
Critical Health News Daily with Doc. Who am I speaking to?
Wait. Mute, my team, mute. Okay, just want to make sure that we got everybody muted here except for myself. So, folks, thank you so much for joining us here on Daily with Doc. I am your hostess, Becca Dukes. I am a certified naturopathic practitioner and holistic health coach. And as always, I am so glad you are tuning in as there's this change going in the whole thought process when it comes to our health and being more empowered, taking things into our own hands. Because, folks, doctors are amazing. We hear about it all the time, especially pharmacist Ben. We love doctors, but they don't know what they don't know. And nutrition is part of it. Yes, there are many of them that are starting to get more into nutrition, but they may not know everything that Dr. Wallach knows. And Dr. Joel Wallach is a pioneer when it comes to the effects of nutrition, or the lack of it, on the body, on our health, and the underlying causes of so many things going on that we think are complicated because it hurts so bad. So many things are breaking down within the body when it's actually boils right down to nutritional deficiencies. So, folks, if you don't know who Dr. Wallach is, he is an amazing, like I said, he's a pioneer. He has sued the FDA 8 times and won so that the whole world can say specific nutrients can help with specific conditions. Well, today we have another great doctor on with us who is a devout follower of Dr. Wallach and actually lived in the state where Dr. Wallach went to college. She went to college in many different states. I'm super excited as we are honored to introduce the remarkable Dr. Judy Reynolds. She is a PhD. She's PAS diplomat at ACAN and a certified holistic health coach. She's a brilliant mind, an educated or passionate educator whose work bridges the gap between animal science and human performance. So, folks, her presentation today, we're going to be talking kind of about borrowing things from the barn, as she's taking how she helped horse champions, taking that information, converting it so that we as humans can also be champions. So she's bringing the principles from that veterinary nutrition and animal physiology and revolutionizing it and putting that. There's not even really much of a twist, is there, Dr. Judy, when it comes to adapting it to human health, energy, and endurance. So, Dr. Judy, she's not only respected in the academic realm for horse and animal science, but she's also a researcher. She's a holistic health coach, as I mentioned. She's dedicated to help not only the horse world from her past, but she's continuing that as well, but now the human world have optimal performance and using what nature has provided to help us achieve that. So please help me welcome Dr. Judy Reynolds. And folks, if you were invited to this program by somebody specific, because we are a resource for an amazing community of certified holistic health coaches, health advocates, just people that love to see people thrive, make sure that you get back with them for any questions and to further, go deeper into, okay, what is it that Dr. Wallach would recommend, which Dr. Judy is going to make some recommendations based on his recommendations today. But Dr. Judy, let's go ahead and jump right into your presentation. I know you've put together an amazing slide presentation. You go deep, you're more on the scientific side of it, and our educated viewers absolutely love that. So folks, before we get started, this program is not meant to take the place of your primary care physician, nor is it meant to treat, diagnose, or cure any disease. It is for educational purposes, folks. As we are more enlightened, more educated as to what our divinely designed bodies can do, when we put the right stuff in, the body itself can do some amazing, amazing things. So Dr. Judy, hello and welcome to Daily with Doc and Becca. Thank you for being today's doc.
Thank you, Becca. This is really fun because I remember envisioning a while ago that we would have multiple doctors and other professionals, everybody doesn't have to be a doctor, that would come in and help us support and promote Dr. Wallach, because he really is a revolutionary person. And the people who follow this already know, but if you don't, you need to look this up. Go to Daily with Doc and start looking up some of the things that Dr. Wallach has done, because it doesn't look like you think I have a lot of resume. Yeah, not really. You need to check out Dr. Wallach. So this is really fun being able to do this. And so I'm glad to be back. We've decided to talk about fueling athletes. I have done a few of these type of talks in the past about, I'm thinking 10 or 11 or something in that range. And we've talked about things like vitamins and minerals, and we're going to eventually go through all the different nutrients that we need to have. But people were asking about athletes last time. And so we decided to talk about this one. And the basic thing here is we're talking about fueling athletes. Well, what do we use? What does fuel mean? So let's assume that we need water. We know we need carbohydrates, fats, proteins, vitamins, minerals, those kinds of things. But when we start talking about the fueling part, that would be like the gas going in the car. If you don't fill the gas tank, the car stops running. It's the same concept. Whereas the proteins in the diet, we would think of more like the parts, like the wheels and the frame and I'm not a car person, but those kinds of things, the parts. And then, of course, with living things, we have growth. We have issues for growth. We also use proteins for that because we start as smaller people when we're born, and we get a lot bigger until we stop our basic growth as adults. So I will pull this PowerPoint up. Okay, are we seeing it okay, everybody? Are you seeing it, Becca?
Yes, ma'am. Go
Okay.
for it.
All right.
That looks great.
So what I'm doing with this is we're going to start talking about what are the energy requirements. And let's just look a little bit about how do we decide what energy requirements are. So there's a publication called the National Research Council, it's part of the government, Nutrient Requirements of Horses. And for about 50 years, they've been doing this. They've been looking at them. I happen to have my old worn copy right here of the 1989. And this is not my most worn one because that one is kind of in shreds, but this was from 1989. And if you look at this, you'll see the most recent one, the most current one is actually this 2007. So that's a long time between 1989 and 2007. If you see over here, was an official reviewer of this most recent nutrient requirements of horses. So what happens is they get people basically who work at universities, and the universities do research along with other private companies. But what this group does is they select research that's out there since the last version, and they summarize them and decide, well, how much of each nutrient do we think horses really need? But since I worked in industry at that time, I was a feed formulator and product manager and things like that. And so here I am in this little thing here, thanks to me, an acknowledgement for doing that. But the reason they do that, I could not have been asked to actually write it. I could only be asked to review it for accuracy because the money that does all this comes from industry. So since I worked for a feed company in industry, I couldn't work and actually review it and actually write it, but I could review it. So this is kind of an important thing for someone to get asked to do, and I was honored to be able to do that. So now if we look on the human side, we have the same basic concept, except they've been doing it for longer and they do it more often. I happen to have these two copies sitting around, so I put a 1989 and a 2006 one out there. And all they are is charts of every possible stage of human development, from prenatal to birth, all the way through to advanced age. There are different charts, and then there are all the nutrients and what the basic requirements would be. We need to keep in mind, though, that both with the horses and with the people, these are the minimum requirements that have prevented disease or symptoms in populations. And I've shown a chart before where that's really not what we're aiming for. We're not aiming to just not be really sick as a population. We're looking for individually having the best nutrient content of our diet that we can possibly have. And so these are, if people want to know, well, how would anybody find out? This is where those charts are located. And again, like I said, with humans, there's much more current one than in 2006. There probably is one in 2023 or 24 or somewhere in that range. You'll notice the change in what they call them. When I was studying, it was recommended dietary allowances, and most people thought it was daily, and it isn't. It's recommended dietary allowances. And then at some point, it went to dietary reference intakes. And right now, I think they're calling it something different, in all honesty. But anyway, they take these charts, supposedly they take current research, and they put this information out to give people a basic guideline. So that's kind of where we want to be starting. Okay, but here's my caveat for all of this. We're going to talk about energy, but we have to meet all of the essential needs first. And this is where the concept of the 90 essential nutrients comes from, meaning that we know for a fact that we need at least 90 different nutrients. 60 of them are minerals, and a lot of them are in parts per million, maybe even parts per billion. So the general public, unless they're specifically supplementing, are not going to be getting these things. And since metabolism is so complicated, people want to say, well, I have this symptom and I need to take this one nutrient. It doesn't work that way. You have to start and meet all the needs. And then after you meet those basic needs that most people need, then we find, especially if there have been nutrient needs for a long time, then you'll find one symptom that's just lingering, that's really bothering you. And then we go back in and we go, well, let's add a little bit more of whatever helps with that symptom. But there's a system out there. One of the names is fractionated nutrition. It's kind of what people call it who are looking from the nutrition side like I am. You don't want to start and say, I have this symptom, I need this nutrient. And in the medical system, what they usually do is they say, I see this symptom, I want to use this drug. And drugs are artificial. They're pharmaceuticals. They're not created normally in nature. So we don't like that method because it has a lot of side effects. But then we can't just go and replace that artificial thing with one nutrient either. So that's a huge concept that we need to keep in mind all the time. So just as an introduction of what we're going to go through, carbohydrates and fats are the main things or components, or we call them macronutrients because they're needed in large amounts. we know what our carbohydrates are. They're like sugars and starches and potatoes and things like that. And then fats, we know the fat that you trim off your steak, or you eat part of it and you trim some off, or any other kind of fat. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of use recently in vegetable oils, which we don't recommend because the problem with them is they have been heated so hot and processed with chemicals just to get them out of the oil, out of the plant that it comes from, that they're no longer easily used in the body. But those are the two ways. And I'm going to show you as we go along, I'm going to show you the concepts of using carbohydrates and fats for horses and people and why. And then I'm also going to actually show you the little chemistry molecules, because I think that helps if people are interested in why are carbohydrates stored differently and why are they broken down and used differently than fats. That's the big thing. But keep in mind, there are only two sources. It makes a big difference which one we use. Obviously, we're going to have energy requirements that are different depending on body weight, age, reproduction, workload, other factors also. We have found in both human and horse nutrition that there are really big problems associated with feeding grain. With horses, it's extreme. With people, we're finding issues with grains because of things like gluten and other issues. But with horses, it really has to do with them not having the ability to digest grains. And I'll show you how in a minute, but they can't digest cereal grains. And if you think about it, wild horses are not running around in a oat or cornfield. Those are not a natural thing for them to eat. So there are problems with that. The other thing we've found, and this works in both, but really specifically in horses, again, they have so many problems eating grains that by replacing what used to go into the diet as grain with fat, there are huge advantages with performance, with growth, with reproduction, pretty much everything you think about. And I have a huge amount of information about this topic, so I'm not going to get through everything today. This is going to be an ongoing thing for a while, but I just want to get everybody oriented to the differences between carbohydrates and fats, and then why the horse industry really, I was at Texas A&M from 1990 to 95, and then I finished my PhD and graduated with that in 1997. And during the time frame that I was there in the early 1990s, a lot of the people were doing research on fat. I personally did all of my research on vitamins and minerals, interestingly, and mostly minerals. So we each had our different things. But since I was there and a lot of my colleagues were doing it, I have, a certain amount of experience just being around them and learning what they were doing also. Okay, energy. What is energy? If you're feeling tired, you don't feel like you can do anything, you're going to say, I don't have any energy. I don't have any energy. Okay, the original source of energy in our system, in our experience, however we want to call that, we get energy from nuclear reactions on the sun. We get the sunlight coming down to our third rock from the sun, and we have plants that are able to do what we call photosynthesis. And that means they can take water and carbon dioxide, and that carbon dioxide has to be in the atmosphere for this to happen. And just a little tip, there is only 0.04% carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. It's not very much. And throughout history, in most cases, there's been more than that. But it's essential. We have to have it. Okay, so then our plants are going to create sugars as a storage form of energy, and they release oxygen, which then the animals and plants, when there's no source of sunlight, like at night, they do what's called cellular respiration, plants at night and animals all the time. And this is then broken down for energy. Okay, so that's the basic thing of the circle of life, energy. Okay, so this is specifically for horses because I'm talking about the structural carbohydrates more. Because one big difference between people and horses is horses eat and are able to get energy from grasses. So I'm going to talk a little bit about each thing and then I'll show you the pictures so that hopefully we can get into some detail. Okay, so the chemical composition of carbohydrates is C6H12O6. This little X is one or more of these. And you notice I've got C6H10O5. That's because a water molecule comes out of each sugar, partly from one sugar, partly from the one next to it, so that they can be hooked together. It'll make sense more in a minute. So when we're talking about horses, there aren't that many sugars that are used other than molasses in the horse world. But starches are in cereal grains like corn, oats, barley, those kinds of things. Okay, so those are the main ones. Then we have structural carbohydrates, such as cellulose, which is a string of glucose units, hemicellulose, which is a string of xylose units, and then lignin. I'll show you pictures again in a minute, but these are all in the grass that they can digest, but they can't digest them themselves without the help of microbes in their, we call it hindgut in horses. The cecum and the colon similar to ours. Cecum is this huge vat of bacteria that is anatomically the same as our appendix. So in people, we have this tiny little appendix and we hope it doesn't get inflamed and rupture so that we have to get it removed. But with horses, they have this huge vat and they can digest those hays in pastures. Now, if you're talking about a cow, then that would be in one of the parts of the stomach. It's called the rumen, and they break down the bacteria in that organ. It's different. It's in the foregut part of the stomach, whereas with horses, it's in the hindgut. Okay, then of course we have fats, mostly triglycerides. It's what we talk about. And the key thing to remember about protein is protein, you'll see in a minute in a diagram, has two parts. It has a part that can come off that is a carbohydrate, and it has another part that comes off that is an amino acid, which is a building block of our bodies. It's our, one of our structural components. So if we break proteins down, there is a certain amount of carbohydrate there that could be used for energy. But the problem is it's not an efficient source of energy because the energy that the body requires to break proteins down and get rid of the excess urine or ammonia in urine, it uses more energy than it gives you. So when people say, oh, protein is either good or bad, the right amount is important because too much costs energy to break it down and not enough, we lose body tissue. We lose muscle, we lose connective tissue, we lose all kinds of things. Okay, so those are our three sources. And just so that from those NRC requirements and things that I showed you, here's just some calculations, a few things. If we have a maintenance horse, the daily requirement, 1.48 megacalories per 100 pounds of body weight, that's a light horse. That's a 1,200 pound horse. A draft horse may weigh up to 2,000 pounds. And you can see it's less per pound of body weight, but it will be more total energy they will need in their diet. And when we look at performance, we're talking about athletes. If they trot, instead of just standing there, twice the energy as the walk, canter 8 times the energy as the walk, and if they're conditioned, in other words, if you train them, because what conditioning does is it allows more blood vessels to form, more hemoglobin to be able to bring more oxygen, all the things that require for exercise. A conditioned horse needs 40% more energy than an unconditioned horse. But of course, they can work harder, longer, faster, whatever the sport is. So that's gonna be important also. Okay, and here's one of my big, huge things. As human nutritionists, we have got to change our terminology because the two types of carbs. And the one is the soluble carbs, which means starches and sugars. We can break them down with our enzymes like amylase in the mouth, gastrase in the stomach. These types of enzymes, it's water soluble. We can break them down with our own enzymes. Those are digested completely differently than the fiber carbohydrates, which go to the hindgut where the bacteria break them down. And so here's what happens when you talk about a low carb diet. If it's humans, whether it's humans really or equines, it's not really low carb because when they say low carb, they are meaning starch and sugar. They're meaning sweet things that raise the blood sugar. But it's not true terminology because the fibers are also carbs. Okay. So what we have to do, and then of course with horses, they have to have mostly carbohydrates in their diet. The bulk of what they eat, 20 pounds a day for the average horse of hay, 100 pounds a day of grass that's wet, 70% water on a pasture, that is carbohydrates. And yet they have to have a very low starch or soluble fiber diet. So if we don't fix these terms, what we're talking about doesn't make sense. So I'm starting the charge here to use our terminology so that it's going to make sense for people. And in the human world, vegetables, you know that we have starchy vegetables like corn, we have potatoes, things like that. And then we have lower starch ones. And we have things like kale and broccoli and, things like that really are lower in starch. So they can be low or medium, really. If you look at the scales that we use for horses, humans would be low or medium, but we don't have carbs we don't do pure sugar in horse diets, like I said, except for molasses. And molasses has been used for a sweetener and you don't want to do too much. But horses have to have high total carb, mostly fiber, but low soluble fiber. So again, it's terminology. We have to know our terms and use them correctly. So what are the soluble carbohydrates? Simple sugars, that's one sugar, 6 carbons, pictures coming, glucose, fructose, things like that. Then we have polysaccharides, and these are our starches. They are bound with what we call alpha bonds, and we can break them down with our own enzymes. With the human, the horse, whatever animal it is, the enzymes. Now, if we have starches in a plant, we just call it a starch, but in an animal, we call it glycogen. So there is sugar stored in a muscle. It's called glycogen, and it actually branches. Whereas in plants, it's more just lines, just single lines. Okay, so again, they're degraded by our enzymes. In the literature, in animals, in cattle, horses, things like that, we call them soluble, non-structural, or non-fiber. I like to stick with the positive, not this is what it is, not what it's not. So I like the term soluble. That's what I'm going to pick to go with. Okay, so our fiber carbohydrates, we call them polysaccharides, means many sugars. Okay, these are not digestible by our horse or human enzymes. We do not have an enzyme like our amylase in the mouth and things like that do it. But the bacteria in the hindgut of the horse, the cecum of the horse, the colon of the human, these actually break down and provide what we call volatile fatty acids. And if you look at horses, 70% of the energy in a high forage ration. Most horses that people don't do a lot with, they either have pasture or they get hay, and they don't get much of anything else. Most of them, unfortunately, don't even get salt and minerals, which they probably really need. Okay, so bacteria are doing that work. So we have cellulose, the most common fiber. Again, we call them beta bonds. They're structurally different than the ones that our enzymes can break down. And the bacteria break those down. So we can use different types of sugars. Those are 2 different kinds of sugars to get cellulose, a string of sugars, hemicellulose, a different string of sugars. But then there's one more. And if you think about your diet, you know that some of the things that you eat are going to for sure go all the way through your digestive tract. And that's what will be in feces, manure, whatever. Well, a big part of that is what we call indigestible polysaccharide or lignin. So that fiber is going to go all the way through. That's what you find in more mature plants. You find a lot of it in things like tree bark and older brush. You find it in the stalks of corn and things like that. So what's going to happen there? It's going to go through the animal. Bacteria can't do it. Horses can't do it. But there are two things that get rid of it, because if they didn't, it would pile up and the whole world would be covered with it. Okay, termites, and it's not them, it's an organism in their gut that can break down lignin, and that's why they can do all the damage, tearing down your barn, your house, or whatever, by digesting all that lignin that's in the wood. The second way to get rid of lignin is fire. That's it. Okay, so we want to make sure we don't get too much of that in our diet, because then we're not getting enough nutrients, but we need some of it so that everything will go through. Okay, we have to get rid of parts of things, so we need to have a way to get it to go through. All right, for this one, I've talked about this in other talks and talked about how the B vitamins are in yellow in this diagram, but I just brought it up here to show you that when we talk about metabolism, that means the breakdown. That means what happens in the body to break down the things that we have eaten. And I just want to remind you that if we take in glucose type things, amino acids, which are building blocks of protein, or fatty acids, they all go through a process of breakdown, and then they go through what we call the TCA cycle, and then they go through another chain, which isn't even listed here, but they do end up producing energy. So really, these are storage molecules for energy. We store it when we get it from the plants. Plants get it from the sun. Plants store it. We eat the plant, or we eat the animal that ate the plant. And then it goes through this. It's really a three-part process. The beginning, the middle is a cycle, and then the end is just a few more chemical reactions and we get energy. Okay, so here's my little glucose molecule, just so we have that in mind as I put the strings of them together. And so again, it's C6H12O6. It's one sugar. It's actually got one carbon up here and carbons around here, and it's got an oxygen. And the rest of these are just going to look like this six-sided thing. Okay, so I don't have to put everything else in it. Okay, let's take molasses because it's interesting. Two sugars you've heard of, glucose and fructose. Okay. They are in molasses and in a lot of other things. The interesting thing about fructose, it does not raise blood sugar, because what happens, fructose goes straight to the liver, and then the liver metabolizes it. And then it goes through a process to become glucose if you need it, gluconeogenesis in the liver, and then you can get energy from it that way. But in our food, it's a very fascinating and interesting process that we have some glucose and some fructose sugar, because the glucose raises blood sugar after a meal. And it's usually an hour and a half to 2 or 3 hours after a meal. If you eat plain sugar, your blood sugar goes up, and that can be dangerous. Your blood sugar has to be maintained within your body. But by having some glucose and some fructose, for instance, in our fruits, fructose is what we call fruit sugar. By having both, you're getting a lot of sweetener that your body uses, the plain glucose. But by also having fructose, your blood sugar doesn't raise as much. And so by having these two different molecules, a wonderful plan of our creator, by having these different molecules, we can get different things accomplished. Okay, and the milk sugar that we feed our babies and animals feed their babies is a different sugar entirely. And it is digestible without even going through the digestive system. It can be absorbed through the stomach and the early parts of the digestive system, because our very young animals don't have a functional digestive system yet. So it's amazing. For every purpose, if you look at everything we have, there's a purpose. Why are there 3 kinds of sugars? Because we need them in 3 different ways. Simple, you know, it's a simple concept. Okay, so carbohydrates, starch. Like I said, strings of sugar that I just have a name here. It's called an alpha bond. I'm not going to put all the chemical molecules to show it. But again, these are broken by amylase and all the other ones in the beginning of the digestive tract, and you can get energy. Now, if you have too much starch, and this is bad for a horse, if you feed too much, what will happen is that extra sugar will go to the back where the bacteria are. And then what happens is in the hindgut, which the cecum and colon in a horse, we have what's called lactic acid. That's the same lactic acid that builds up in the muscle of an athlete. If they work hard, use up all their sugar, glycogen in the muscle, and they keep going without oxygen, they have to create a bunch of lactic acid, which the body can replace, can break down later. But that's the same lactic acid. And so the problem with horses is that if the starch and sugar don't all get digested in the beginning, they go to the back, the bacteria ferment them, and you get lowered cecal pH, and you get horrible things for horses called colic, and that's any kind of an ache. It's really any kind of an ache in the body, but it's usually concerned something wrong in the digestive tract. You know, the most horrible things would be twisted, the whole gut's twisted, and without surgery, the horse dies. So colic, and then founder, which is a fascinating thing, and it's the main reason why we've really reduced the starch and sugar in horse feeds and gone to fat. Founder is a situation where if you think of a horse, they have hooves. Okay, they have big round hooves, one on each foot, but it's really like your fingernail being attached to some connective tissue and then to the bone in your finger, except you got 11, 12, 2,000-pound horse standing up on top of that. So horses are very sensitive to too much sugar in the blood or to any kind of a poison that comes out from food poisoning, whatever, in the blood. The nail, the whole hoof of the horse will actually come apart from the bone. And later on, as I get to other parts of this lecture, it's going to be not today, but I'll show you some pictures. But again, devastating. Horses do not survive founder. Starts with laminitis, the tissue between the hoof and the bone. It's irritated, and if it gets bad enough, literally you're going to lose your horse. So these are why it's such a big deal that we have to feed horses differently than people. Okay, we can carb load with athletes, and the purpose of carb loading is to get as much glycogen or sugar in the muscle of the athlete as possible. But you can't carb load with horses because they'll colic or founder. Anybody that owns a horse knows how bad those are. Okay, so now we're to our structural, our fiber carbohydrate. This is cellulose, again, glucose molecules, but again, it's a different bond. It's just the oxygens, hydrogens are different in that bond. So they have to go to that back part of the horse or to our colon. Same thing happens with us. And so you get that bacterial fermentation. But instead of lactate that I was just talking about, if you've heard of volatile fatty acids, they really are fats. They're considered fats, but they are called acetic, which is 2-carbon, propionic, which is 3-carbon, which I'm using a triangle for, and butyric acids, which is a 4-carbon fat. And they're called volatile because they're so small, they go out in the air, but they're an energy source. Okay, so a horse can take the cellulose or hemicellulose, which is a different sugar, and create these, and then we can absorb them, or the horse can absorb them and break them down because they're just smaller carbon units. 2 carbons, 3 carbons, 4 carbons, and we started with 6 to begin with. Okay, so the bacteria worked for us. All right, using a different sugar, Excuse me. And this one happens to be xylose. Again, beta bonds can't break it down with our enzymes, but the bacteria do, and you get the same results. Volatile fatty acids, and you can get energy that way. Okay. Now remember, our lignin can't break it down. You got to have termites or you got to have fire to break that down. So no energy, but it does go through the animal and it makes sure other things go through. And if a person is constipated, the last thing in the world you want is a constipated horse, because that means something's really bad's going on and you've got hours to fix it. So we want to get that stuff through the tract. Okay, and I'm just putting this up here. I'm not going to talk about protein much today, but as I said, proteins have a central carbon, that's just one C. They have an H up the top. They have a sugar group, COOH, a carboxyl unit that is a carbohydrate and goes into carbohydrate metabolism. And then they have this amino group that only proteins have. It's just an NH2. Okay, so you have a central carbon, NH2, and that has to be broken down, and the urea goes into the urine. That's how we get rid of that. But each amino acid on this part right here, whoops, back up a minute. Each one right here is different. Okay, so the smallest one is just another H. That's the smallest one, but then it can be all kinds of other things. If we look at our essential amino acids and our non-essential amino acids, that's what a protein looks like. Okay, so you can see how it can function as a source of carbohydrate if necessary, but not a good idea to try to do that. Okay, now what is different between the sugars in those 6 carbon and 5 carbon, all the different carbon sugars strung together with bonds that can be broken down by our enzymes? Well, here's a fat. Doesn't look anything like that. So they are triglycerides. I'm showing you triglycerides. They are the most common ones. Tri means 3. Glycerol, this is a sugar because it's in the ratio of, 6, 12, 6. In this case, it's 3, 6, 3. So you have, your hydrogens, your carbons, and your oxygen. This will just go into sugar metabolism. But it's got 3 fats attached to it. And if you notice these fats, they have carbon, 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 carbons all along here. And they have a different bond. Okay, we'll see what happens to them in a minute. They have a different bond. And you can see that they're attached over here. And over here, they have an O and an OH, and that's the end of it. So these are just these are generic fatty acids that we're putting on here. Now, when you want to talk a lot more about fat metabolism, which again, I'm not going to cover right now, but if you've heard of things like omega-3 and 6 fatty acids and things like that, they name the fatty acids according to one end is the omega end. They start there, and the double bonds, there can be double bonds between these carbons, in which case you'll have less hydrogens on there. And then you will get, these are saturated. They have all the hydrogens they can have. But you can see this is a totally different structure. Now, the purpose of this structure is for storage. It's for longer term. It's going to be stored in fat cells. It's going to be stored in the liver if you have too much of it there. So 2 storage mechanisms, one for quick, which is the sugars, one for longer term, which is the fatty acids. Okay, so how do we break down a fatty acid? Interesting. What actually happens is these 2, one on the top and one on the bottom, or one on each end, come off and go through the membrane, because we have a lipase, which means lip is fat, ACE is enzyme, and it breaks them. And then this and the middle one go through together, and then they get broken down after they're inside the cell. Don't know why it matters, but that's kind of one of those things. So then after we absorb it, it'll either get reabsorbed as a triglyceride, and then it'll go somewhere, or it may be broken down further the way it is. Okay. And again, there's the 3 carbon sugar. It's going to go into that TCA cycle, and there'll be energy out of it. But what happens to these long strings of fats? We have a process called beta oxidation. And what happens is that enzyme will go find one of the ends and start taking off 2 carbon units. It'll cut a 2, 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 cut each one off until they're all 2 carbon. And then what do we really have? We have acetic acid, that same thing that we got, that 2 carbon sugar, right, that the bacteria made. And that can just go into being broken down also. But here's the problem if we don't use normal natural fats. Our enzymes, like that, like the lipases, they recognize a normal fat. But if we're using something like a vegetable oil that has been denatured, it's like if you take an egg and you fry it really hot in a pan and it goes from a raw egg to a cooked egg, you can denature that fat and that protein in the egg. Now, that is if you cook eggs at too high a temperature. We love eggs. We use eggs all the time. And I mean us as a group, but we do not cook them at high temperatures. So our fats, if they're not cooked at too high a temperature, are fine. But if we cook them at too high a temperature, then we can't absorb them. And then what happens is we get those fats that can't be absorbed. Our body has to put them somewhere. They might put them in your hair and you'll have oily hair. They might put them under your skin and you'll have dark spots or funny looking spots in your skin. They might build up somewhere else in your body. A liver would be a really bad place for them to build up. So we want to make sure we're using natural fats as we do this. Okay, and the history of feeding fats, back to horses again. Forages only have about 1 to 2% fat. This is your typical hays that and grasses that horses eat. And that's on a, basically 10% water like a hay would be, whereas your pasture would be 70% water. So we look at the kind of like the dry matter amount. Think of our cereal grains, oats and corn. Interestingly, oats have about 5% fat and corn has about 4% fat. Most people would think it would be the other way around, but that's kind of the way it is. Looking at horses as a whole physiological unit, they don't have a gallbladder. Well, the purpose of the gallbladder in people is the liver creates the bile, which breaks down fat. Fat emulsifier breaks it down, separates the parts, like I was just showing you. But then in people, that bile goes to the gallbladder because we eat meals. And when we're going to have a meal, our gallbladder will squeeze out a bunch of bile and we'll sit there with that big meal in our stomach. But if you think of in nature, a horse is wandering around actually all but about 6 hours of the day and night, wandering around, preferably grazing. And they don't eat meals. So they don't want a big dump of bile. They want the bile to trickle in all the time. Okay. And that's one of the reasons why if we give a big, huge meal to a horse and they've got trickle in bile from their gallbladder, it isn't easy for them to digest. That's why we have to have smaller meals and spread out the meals. So back in the 70s, they started doing research on adding fat. And interesting thing about that is they used beef tallow for the added fat to see what would happen. And most of you that have had horses realize that it's not real easy to get your horse to eat beef tallow. But what they did find is all these amazing effects. So then the big thing changed and they started using vegetable oils. And at the time that I was doing this research, from 90 to 95, and then even when I was out working in industry, after that, we used vegetable oil type products because we didn't realize the problems that we now know about them. Okay, so the industry has changed a lot. But performance horse rations have changed so that they contain fats. The good news is actually the company that I worked at used stabilized rice bran for their fat source. It's 20% fat and it's the brown part that you take off of rice that turns it into white rice. It's the wheat germ and the bran. It's an amazing health food product. Not only is it high in fat, important fat that horses need, but it's also high in niacin. And if you go back to there were several talks, but the last one I focused on niacin. And it just happens to have one of the top amounts of niacin that you can get in the world. Okay. So all this history has happened. People didn't even try to feed fat to horses because they just thought, well, horses don't eat fat. They don't have a gallbladder, all that stuff. But they didn't realize that they were having so many problems with feeding all the grains. It would be great if they didn't have to do that. Okay. So here are some advantages of feeding fat. I know we're not going to have time for a lot of questions here. I'll pick a spot here and stop so we can do questions, and then we'll just have to go on next time. Okay, so the advantages of feeding fat. Okay, it increases the digestible energy density of the diet, because if you look at how many calories are in fat versus carbohydrates and proteins are about the same, but fats have 2.25 times as many calories. Okay, that's because they're tightly together in those triglycerides where everything's all crammed together, and you're not using so much space. You don't have any oxygens in there except at the end, taking up space. And so they can, you can pack more calories or bonds. Each one of those bonds holds energy in a smaller place. Okay, so that's an advantage. You don't have to eat as much. Hugely, fats are digested more efficiently. If you feed up to 15% of the total diet in fat, and that's a lot, it's all digested in the beginning of the tract. It's all digested. So there's no waste when you feed fat. Okay. It also decreases the thermal load, because when we break down our carbohydrates and our proteins, heat is released, and the body has to get rid of that heat. If they're exercising, athletes, horses, human, whatever they are, you don't have to get rid of as much fat if you're using fat as part of your diet, or as heat for that. And interestingly, if you think about humans, what stops a human athlete, depending on if they're weightlifters, very muscly people, if they're short, medium, long, extreme long distance racers, they're going to have different diets, because we want either a lot of muscle for quickness, and then even within the muscle, we have different types of muscle fibers. And that happens in both people and animals. Okay. But what stops a racehorse? Most people think you watch a horse race and some are running and then some come catch them. And that's usually the ones in the front are stopping and just running slower. And the ones in the back have saved some energy and they come and they win in the end, or however that scenario works out. But what actually stops a racehorse is the thermal load in the muscles. It's not the lack of oxygen. It's not the lack of all the things that we would think about. Interesting. You find that out, but it's because they have so much muscle mass in their body compared to us. They run on 4 legs. A lot of those things make a difference too. Okay. And of course, what we've already said, if we use fat, we don't have to have fermentive digestion of starches in our high energy rations, because too much starch goes to the back end of the horse, gets broken down, and then we are looking at the possibility of our colic and founder, which we do not want. Okay, let's see where we're at. Okay, one more of these. It also has a sparing effect on muscle glycogen. So this is what happens. Your body will burn those fats from the diet, and after it's done, it'll go to the muscle glycogen. So it doesn't even start burning muscle glycogen as soon as if you don't have fat in the diet. Okay. There are also diseases. There's one called RER, or recurrent exertional rhabdomyolysis, and this is just the breakdown of muscle. Okay. Myo is muscle, lysis is break. Where dietary fat, they can digest dietary fat, but if you give them the normal quote amount of sugars, their muscles don't work. It's called tying up, because they'll literally stand there and they can't move. life-threatening. Okay. And another fun one is dietary fat helps in conception with both stallions and mares. And also vitamin E, natural source vitamin E, things like that are a big deal. And it also works with people. Okay, remember, there are these essential nutrients that people a lot of times are not getting. And vitamin E, vitamin C, a lot of those things, and the dietary fat profile can help with that. I'm just going to see which one's next, but I think we better quit. We can do a couple questions. Yeah, okay, we don't need to go there today. All right, what do we have for questions? And I'll
All right, Judy, that's a lot of information. And
I know,
and
it's a lot.
I love the fact that you were talking about fats, because fat has been demonized.
Oh, yes.
Now, you went over horse. What are some good fats that humans can take in? Let's just do kind of a quick little wrap up and summary here that humans can take in before I get to the next few questions.
Okay. When we look at our essential nutrients, we have two. And actually, if you want me to, I can pull up those slides. I just have to go looking for them. I have probably hidden them. The omega-3 and the omega-6, or we can do that next time. Let's just do that next time. That's fine. Because it's, you know, it's hard to answer the question when you're looking at slides. Okay. So in our essential nutrients, what we have is 2 essential fatty acids. Okay. Now, one is called omega-3 and the other one's called omega-6. But we need to keep in mind that there are a lot of omega-6 and omega-3 fats. It's not just one of each. Then it goes by how many carbons are in there. So is the total fat 8, 10, 12, 16, 18 carbons, or is it less? Okay. But there is an omega-6 and an omega-3 fatty acid that we must have in our diets. And so we have, as part of our main nutrition supplement packs, we have those essential ones. Okay. And they're very delicate. We have to be very careful with them. They have to be actually packaged without oxygen. They get packaged in nitrogen and put into those bottles because they will go rancid. Any fat that is not, as I showed you, having all the hydrogens along all the carbons, that's called saturated. Any fat that is not saturated, we need them for our cell membranes. They're essential. And we also need them for our nervous tissue and some of those other tissues. But they're very fragile. So if we don't treat them correctly, as you know, they will what we call go rancid, which means free radicals, damaging all our body tissues and things like that. So when we look at what is fat and what is essential, we need those 2 specific ones. Okay. Then we need cholesterol, and it's not listed as an essential nutrient because we can make it. We can make cholesterol, but it's possible to not be able to make enough. And when people are encouraged to do specific things to stop us from having the amount of cholesterol that we're making, we can end up with all kinds of problems because cholesterol is the major part of our nerves, our brain, our nervous system, all the nerves throughout our body. And it's also a main component of other tissues in the body. And those omegas 3 and 6 are also part of our cell membranes. Because what really happens is if your fats are solid at room temperature, like the meat that's on a steak or butter or some of things like that that have a lot of fat it doesn't have, or it's got all the hydrogens there, right? Those are solid, and they would provide a cell membrane that's too solid around your cells. You wouldn't be able to do the things you need to do. Your cells within your body wouldn't be flexible. Okay. So we've got to have those fats that they're flexible because they have double bonds on the carbons, and that allows them to move. If it's solid chains, they're straight. Okay, so we need some of each. We need straight ones in our body, and we need the ones that are flexible in our body. Make sense? And again, I mean, it's complicated. It's complicated.
It's complicated. Yes,
complicated.
yes, it's complicated.
But we need the different types of things. And that's why we our list of essential nutrients is, those are all things that we can't make or we can't make enough of. And we've got to make sure we eat them to be as healthy as we can be.
Yes. So omega-3, omega-6, essential fatty acids, the difference between essential fatty acids and then fat.
Okay. Fatty acid is named because there's a group that they call an acid group on it. But fat is a term for things that are mostly carbons with hydrogens, whereas carbohydrates have a C6H12O6 ratio. Okay. And they're both energy. Their energy is stored in the bonds. And then when the bonds are broken, we get the energy out. And that's what we use to do all our cellular functions. But they're similar. But again, we think of carbohydrates as a quick form that we can get at easier. And we think of the fats as a longer term storage. And we know if we eat too much, and it's not eating too much fat, it's eating too much of things for what we need is why we store fat. So, but the whole topic of fats being bad and trying to go to low fat diets that we did for, what was it? When was it? Was it the 50s? Around the 50s, I believe, that they started all that craze because they were trying to sell oils and things like that, trying to get everybody to quit eating butter and eggs and bacon and all those things. And that was a marketing campaign. But, that whole craze, what people weren't realizing is that there are only two sources of energy: carbohydrates and fats. So if you get rid of all the fats, you're eating more and more and more and more sugars. Okay. And we know a lot of problems with sugar. Again, you got to separate the carbohydrates into the sugars and the fibers. So you really have three things that you can get energy from. You can get energy from sugars and starches, you can get energy from fibers, and you can get energy from fat. But the low fat demonized cholesterol thing was really, I don't know. There are so many things that happen. People make mistakes when they're trying to learn, when they're trying to understand. They make mistakes, and sometimes they actually do it on purpose for a bad reason. And you end up with things that aren't good. If you look out throughout history, we didn't know that the earth wasn't the center of the universe. We didn't know that letting your blood out and letting it drip all over the ground was not a good way when you were sick to get better. I mean, we did things in history that just weren't too good, but we don't know what we don't know.
That's it. Right. Absolutely. So next question is, and this is going in regards to having more fat. Excuse me. Question is, so you won't sweat as much with more fat?
Oh, that's a good question. Sweat is a way to get rid of heat. That's exactly right. So the fat that you eat does not provide as much heat, not even close. So that is correct. You won't have to sweat as much because the purpose of sweating is to get rid of heat. But when you sweat, you lose water and you lose all your electrolytes and things that are in your blood plasma, and they have to be replaced. Thus, a lot of the 90, the vitamins and minerals and things like that we lose through sweat. Bringing this back to horses so it makes more sense. If it's winter and you have a horse and he's standing out in a snowbank, you could feed fats, or you could feed fibers, or you could feed sugars. If you feed fat, he doesn't get as much heat to keep him warm in the winter. If you feed sugar, he'll get intermediate, but we don't feed sugar that much because that's not good for horses for a different reason. So the answer in the winter is a lot of fiber. Because when a horse eats fiber, he has a lot of heat, right? But that
Right.
racehorse, what we actually do with racehorses, the best thing to do is take them off all but 1% of their body weight as forage for 3 days before the race. And they lose body weight and they lose bulk in their gut. And then you're still feeding that fat, right?
Mm-hmm.
That replaces using a diuretic like furosemide. They used to do that with racehorses. But think about it. If you use a diuretic like furosemide, you're going to get rid of that same 3% of body weight. But where did it come from? It came from your water and all your electrolytes and everything. Would you want to be dehydrated and out of your electrolytes when you're about to go run a race? No.
No,
First of all, you wouldn't
I would just
feel like
say
it.
that would cause dehydration.
Yeah, first of all, you wouldn't feel good enough to run, right? And
Mm-hmm.
second of all, you'd be hotter. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, you find things out.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And yeah, in the beginning, you were talking about, digestive issues and having horses colic, which you did not want to do. We had a few horses colic. The whole process was not a pretty process. Sometimes we were successful. But as I was working with Dr. Wallach, we had somebody call in, and as we were sitting at the table talking with this individual, going over the horse and the diet, and they were being boarded at a horse barn, and they were feeding them primarily oats. And Dr. Wallach said, stop the oats. Now, the symptoms that this horse was having is they were losing weight, they were losing their hair, and it was a young horse that was going gray.
Well, I mean, the gray is genetic in that case. I mean, if they have a gray gene in a horse, they start out a solid color and then they start to go gray, and it takes them 10, 12 years to go from their normal solid color to that gray. But that's a gene. That's a specific gene for that. That's different from people. Okay. I was going to go back to what you said before that. Well, okay. About the diet, for sure. Okay, in the past, the huge things that have helped us prevent colic in horses, which were always it was a nightmare. Deworming. In the 1980s, they came out with a fabulous, unbelievable, totally wonderful dewormer called ivermectin. And that's what we used, because all animals, pretty much all people, everybody are exposed to parasites, and you've got to get rid of them. I had my horse before that, and the veterinarian would have to come out and drench. They would put a tube for horses. You put a tube through the nose and then down into the stomach. Okay, you have to switch over, but you can't go through the mouth of a horse. You have to go through the nose and then switch down over into the esophagus just to deworm them. And you can imagine horses just love having a 12, 14-foot tube put up their nose and down in to put the worming paste or the worming liquid into the stomach. So when ivermectin came out, it became, the owner could buy the paste and deworm. And we used to deworm like every 2 months or somewhere around that, 3, 4 times a year, something like that. And it completely got rid of a lot of the colics and problems like that. So that was huge. The other thing is with nutrition, a lot of people were feeding forages that had too much undigestible fiber, and it would get stuck somewhere, or they weren't providing enough water or salts so that they would drink the water, and you would have these dehydration colics. Those things were super common. The other kind of colic that was most common is too much. They would give them this huge pail of feed, like a sweet feed, corn, oats, molasses, always give them a huge amount of that. And as soon as, the first couple of pounds, they can digest. And after that, they can't. And so it just leaves the stomach, keeps on going, bacteria break it down, and you've got a gas colic. basically, that kind of thing. So that was just a huge breakthrough at that point in time. So, we are all thankful for that.
Yeah. We learn by mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Trial and error.
Yes.
And then we get it
Well,
figured out.
Yep. In that case. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that drug is actually made by a slight modification of a product that is excreted by soil bacteria. Because the bacteria in the soil are eating things and they're trying to get rid of worms or whatever that might interfere with what they do. So scientists found it, discovered it, and started using it. And I mean, it's amazing how it's like penicillin. Hey, find some mold and you've got penicillin. I mean, it's fascinating.
Well, and for that specific anti-parasitic, it was approved for human use.
Yeah,
Was it in the 90s or 60s?
It's
a long time.
I'm not sure, but I think it was 2015. It was won the Nobel Peace Prize or Nobel Prize, whichever one. Because what it does is they use it in places in the world like Africa where they're on the equator. They never get cold enough weather to kill off things like parasites.
Mm.
And the reason it's mostly used is it kills the parasite that causes river blindness. There's a worm, a parasite that goes in the eyes of people and causes them to go blind. And when they discovered that, they started using it and they would literally give it out every week. They would call it their Sunday pill or whatever. And everybody would come in. It was really cheap, a penny or two. And once every Sunday they would come and get that, and then they wouldn't get river blindness. So that's why it won the prize. But it does all kinds of things that nobody knew it would. I mean, but animal people, I mean, most of us know which drugs we use on our dogs because dogs have certain parasites and we use them, fenbendazole and all these different things. And so that's just something that sanitation, dewormers, increase in nutrition and all that have drastically improved life for people and animals. It's science, it's discoveries, so the thing is we have to learn about them.
Mm-hmm.
My pet peeve is that the average person can't get access to the scientific information. And that's something I think we need to start working on. If you work at a university or a big company, they actually pay for the rights for their employees to have access to the scientific journals. But if you're an independent person like me now, I don't work for anybody. I would have to pay hundreds of dollars just for one journal every year. It's not possible to do it. So you have to be affiliated with someone, or you have to just go out and find the abstracts. And, I mean, the information should be out there for everybody. So one of the things I'm trying to do is take it and bring it out and give it to people. The reason for it or whatever, the result. So.
Yes. Well, we do have one hand up, and I'm going to ask them to unmute. And Bill, is your question in regards to today's topic?
It's more of people for athletes about our tangy tangerine, but Rise and Restore, if we should take that with food, at even a couple spoonfuls of yogurt to make it the most effective. So tying in with our EFAs, fats.
Okay. Tangy tangerine.
Rise and Restore mostly.
Tangy tangerine, you want to make sure you're taking it with enough water. If you take it before a meal, it's going to be beneficial for that meal. If you take it after the meal, it's less beneficial for that particular meal. I think a lot of us, myself included, prefer to make a drink from it and drink it throughout the day. So we've got some of it available throughout the day. Remember, one of the main things that Tangy Tangerine provides is the B vitamins and vitamin C. And those are water soluble. They leave the body within 12 hours or so of when you drink them. So by having them with enough liquid and throughout the day, it's going to be able to do as much as it can before it actually leaves the body. So
Okay,
that's
understood regarding that, but Rise and Restore, if we take that on an empty stomach when we get up in the morning and then at night before going to bed,
not an
should
empty
that be
stomach.
with some kind of food?
Not an empty stomach. You have to either have liquid or take it with the food.
Okay.
But it mixes best in liquid. And I understand what you're asking, Bill. One thing we got to remember is for most of us, we're dehydrated
All the
so
time.
Water, making it something that is quickly absorbable is going to be in your best interest. And with Rise and Restore, what Longevity has done is they've taken the nutrients that are in the tangy tangerine, they've split them into 2 doses. So you have Rise, which is more energizing, and then Restore, which is more restorative while you are sleeping, which it is a fantastic system. But it does not take the place of a healthy body pack. You still have to have your OsteoFX in there, and you still have to have your EFA Plus. So there is a 3.0 version of the Start Pack that includes Rise and Restore, OsteoFX, and then the EFA Plus. So thank you, Bill, for bringing that question to the table today. And folks, we're going to be digging more into the science. So if you're a science geek, you're in the right place. Yeah. If you're not, it's still great knowledge so that you understand what the body needs to be able to have optimal performance. Dr. Judy, thank you so much for being on with us today and bringing this information about the fats, the essential fats, the carbohydrates, the purpose of carbohydrates, fiber, fats to the table here with our Daily with Doc audience. And folks, if you're referred to this program by somebody specific, get back with them and say, hey, I want optimal performance as a human. What can I take? Ask them. If they don't know, say, hey, how can I get this Healthy Body Start Pack? Because that is going to give you a foundation of what the body needs. And as my guests or my co-hosts are coming up on the screen with us, I just want to do a quick little request. Folks, there are so many people out there hurting. And I know as we're walking around, we know many of them. Share this program with them. Share the Daily with Doc episodes with them. We are a resource for an amazing community. And the person that shared this program or any of our programs with you, they care about you. We care about you. And together, we can help create healthier communities. The information goes for our pets as well. Longevity has an amazing pet line that helps them have optimal health. Also, if you're a gardener, they've got the Bloomin' Minerals so that your own produce that you're putting on your table has the minerals that the body needs. Because chances are it's not in the soil, especially if you've been using that soil for many years or many seasons. We have to continually be forward thinking and consistent in making sure that we are supplying what our bodies need so that we don't have what pharmacist Ben calls my body's falling apart. MBF. Is it disorder, AJ? My body's falling apart disorder or syndrome or whatever. But when you feel like you're falling apart, you are in disease. Thank you, Albert. You're in the right place to get information to help slow that aging process down. So, Dr. Judy, thank you again for being on with us.
Thank you.
In your slides, I mean, you go into so much detail and showing all of those hydrogen bonds and what happens, when you introduce certain things and the fats. Being a homeschooling mom, as we're doing science, totally clicks. I see the H's, the C's, the O's. It's like, okay, that's carbon, that's hydrogen, that's oxygen, putting all the bonds together to create what we know as food, substance, and it just keeps going on and on and on.
I will break out my chemistry set sometime and do some little molecules for you.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Well, folks, today we have on with us, and before I do this, I would like to invite you to go to dailywithdoc.com. Make sure that you sign up for the newsletter. We've got some amazing things coming up that we're excited to be able to share with you. So sign up for that newsletter. That is available to everyone, not just those who have never worked with anybody. But if you are working with somebody, you're referred, get back with them. They are your person that cares most about you. And if you found this program on your own, I do have a call team of certified holistic health coaches waiting to take your call and help you choose what's going to be a best protocol option for you based on the science and research and formulations of our Dr. Joel Wallach, who is just near and dear to my heart, as I was able to spend many years, and he's still kicking, folks. I have so many people. What happened to Dr. Wallach? Is he still alive? Yes, he's still alive. He's spending time with his family. After decades of being on the road and doing programs throughout the year, 360 days a year, he needed some time off. And his family's forcing him to do that. He went kicking and screaming, but he's still kicking and screaming, folks. So just wanted to throw that out there. Today we have on with us, as far as our co-hosts go, we have the amazing Marilyn. She's putting amazing news into the chat that then helps me to go back and it's like, okay, what did she say? So I can go back myself and read. What did I miss? So, folks, I hope you're taking advantage of that. And if you're not here live with us, you are missing out, as we are here most Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays from 12 to 1 p.m. Pacific, 1 to 2 Mountain, 2 to 3 Central, and 3 to 4 plus Eastern. By going to daily, well, you need to email us because we're making some changes. Zoom@dailywithdoc.com. Again, that's Zoom@dailywithdoc.com so that you can continue to be here with us live on YouTube. So thank you so much, Marilyn. And we have Albert joining us from South Africa as he's letting people in. He's our gatekeeper today. Thank you so much, Albert. If it wasn't for you keeping an eye on things and making sure that we had security, we wouldn't have people coming in, because I get like super focused on what's going on that, people are popping in the waiting room and I don't see them. So thank you, Albert, for keeping an eye on that. And we also have Sherry, who is part of our tech crew. She gets on with me and AJ an hour early, helping to make sure that everything is set up. So if you're watching us on Facebook or Rumble or YouTube or Spotify or X or Instagram, I mean, the list goes on and on. If there's a way to comment, let us know you're there. But most importantly, subscribe and then share with others. So thank you, Sherry, for helping us get that all set up so that the stream goes out and there's sound and picture and all those good things. And then AJ, who has helped us get out on all those different platforms, keeping things fresh and alive, and is on top of it as we are expanding, reaching more and more people each and every day. Thank you so much, AJ, for all that you do as also part of our tech crew. And folks, if it wasn't for amazing people like Dr. Judy Reynolds, we wouldn't have this information to share with you. So thank you, Dr. Judy, for bringing your wisdom, your knowledge, and how we can apply even from the animal world to the other mammal with 2 feet, humans, as to what we can do to help ourselves. So thank you, Dr. Judy, and everybody joining us. Have a fantastic day. And until next time. Oh, tomorrow we have Pharmacist Ben, as it is Pharmacist Fridays. You know, AJ was raising his hands because he thought I was going to forget. Nope, I remember. Again, my name is Becca Dukes. As a certified holistic health coach, as a certified naturopathic practitioner, and the director of student services for the Institute of Holistic Health. I am so glad that you invested this time into yourself, your family, and your community so that you also can have a better by the minute life. Until next time, bye for now. Oh, did I give the phone number? Call team. I'm so sorry. 855-949-3377. If you're not working with anybody and you would like to speak with a certified holistic health coach as to what nutrition you need to help keep your body going strong. Bye for now.
This program is for educational purposes only. The content is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diseases, nor is it intended to take the place of your primary care physician. The statements in this program have not been evaluated by the FDA. Testimonials are shared as individual experiences of the individual. Results vary and may not be typical. We do not make any claims regarding health or income. As an empowered individual, you do have options available. We are honored to have a founding father of the science of epigenetics,